You know, the battle to control New Brunswick politically has always come down to one or two things. Right-wing Anglophone factions trying to hold power, get it back, and centrist Anglophone factions trying to work with the French to have a kind of a coalition government that will respect both citizens' language. Now, the case we're talking about today is quite interesting. It happened before even New Brunswick was incorporated within Canada. And it talks about the first political riot and first anti-sedition law in New Brunswick history, and it dates back all the way to 1785. Now, today we're taking the majority of information from the University of New Brunswick St. John research on their Historical Arts project, which also covers crime and punishment. So all credit goes to them at unb.ca/St. John/arts/projects/crime and punishment/society/violence.html. Now, in the late 19th and 20th centuries, history textbooks, newspaper editorials, and public commemoration of the past projected a romanticized image of the Loyalist refugees from the American Revolution, 1781 and on. Much of this rhetoric emphasized that the Loyalists bequeathed to Canada a culture of deference and respect for the law. In reality, the American refugees arrived in St. John in the 1780s were not always unified politically and socially. This was revealed in the faction-driven politics in New Brunswick's first election in 1785, which coincided with its first political riot. The event, as explained in detail by New Brunswick historian David Bell, was followed by the most repressive piece of legislation ever enacted in New Brunswick. Now, during 1783, several thousand Loyalist refugees arrived at the mouth of St. John River in what was then northern Nova Scotia. They disembarked at a pre-existing settlement of New England traders and fishermen called Partown. Over the next 2 years, a new British colony, New Brunswick, was created in northern Nova Scotia, and Partown was incorporated with a royal charter as the city of St. John. Now, most of the Loyalists who ended up in the St. John region were from New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, but the elite agents who enjoyed connections with New Brunswick's first governor, Thomas Carleton, were New Englanders. Over the course of 1783, 6 major transport fleets delivered refugees to the mouth of the St. John River. Disputes and delays in the granting of town lots and farm lots in the interior lowered morale among the heterogeneous Loyalist population. An attempt by 55 genteel Loyalists to acquire a disproportionate share of land provoked protests in, of all places, New York. The controversy spilled over to St. John's first newspapers. The creation of New Brunswick in 1784 out of Nova Scotia was a potential setback for the protesters as it benefited the elite, but they did not openly oppose it. Now, in 1785, Partown and a neighboring community of Carleton were merged and incorporated again as the city of St. John, providing rank-and-file Loyalists with a degree of local government. The colony governor called a general election for the following year, and in St. John, the earlier political tensions resurfaced. Now, opposition to elite was based in the Lower Cove area of St. John. Their opponents were identified with Upper Cove, the Market Slip area. During the polling, elections at this time lasted several days. A mob of Lower Covers surrounded and attacked Upper Cove supporters at Mallard's Tavern. British troops were called out to restore order, and a number of rioters were arrested. The election continued, and in St. John the victory went to the Lower Covers. The government ordered a recount of the votes, prompting a series of petitions to the authorities in Frankton, asking that the new legislature be dissolved. Rather than act on the petitions, the legislature passed a law which made petitions to the government bearing more than 20 signatures punishable by a heavy fine and jail term. 2 newspaper publishers and 4 citizens who persisted in presenting a protest petition were arrested, charged, convicted, and fined. Now, as the events of 1785 indicate, the Loyalist County of New Brunswick was formed in an atmosphere of dissent and repression. Now, some 65 years later, another outbreak in St. John, this time the orange versus the green. Now, during the 1840s, St. John, Portland, which was a separate town, which was amalgamated with St. John in 1889, Frankton and Woodstock all experienced ethnic and or sectarian violence stemming from tensions between Irish Catholics, mostly immigrants, and the Protestant majority. By 1851, nearly half of St. John's population had been born in the British Isles, and most immigrants were Irish. Now, a series of fights and riots in St. John area reveal not only weaknesses of local policing, but also the intensity of ethnic identities. In 1847 at Woodstock, Carleton County, tensions between Irish Catholics and area members of the Loyal Orange Association left at least 10 dead. The Orangemen, who organized many lodges across the colony, were a fraternal society based on loyalty to British monarchy and anti-Catholicism. Expecting an armed Orange Church parade to return to the town, Catholics gathered with guns, axes, clubs, and sticks. In the aftermath of the fighting at Woodstock, no Protestants were arrested and nearly 90 Catholics were charged. Of the 49 men tried, 35 were convicted. Now, a riot in Frankton, the colony's capital, was more of a series of assaults and fights. One Catholic was fatally wounded, and although a coroner's jury named the assailant, he was not prosecuted. As at Woodstock, no Orangemen were charged, but 34 Catholics were indicted by a grand jury and 14 imprisoned. Now, the first reported incident of sectarian violence in St. John took place in 1839. Over the next decade, as the local Irish Catholic population grew, the clashes multiplied in frequency and intensity. The first major incident took place on July 12, 1842, at the LOA's annual celebration of the Battle of the Boyne. In subsequent years, July 12th, March 17th, and a Christmas season were marred by assaults, gunfire, and a number of murders. Now, it was rare for Protestants to be arrested. A violent encounter on July 12, 1847 left no official death toll, but rumors of unreported fatalities. Historian Scott C. estimates that up to 10,000 New Brunswickers, many of them descendants of Loyalists, had joined the LOA by the late 1840s. Now, on July 1249, a parade of Orangemen, many of them from surrounding rural communities, attempted to march through the largely Catholic immigrant waterfront neighborhood of York Point. At its head was an Orangeman mounted on a white horse, representing King William of Orange, who had defeated the Stuart forces at the Battle of the Boyne in 1690. They were returning from Indiantown area Portland, where he met brethren from upriver. The Orangemen carried swords, pistols, and muskets. The mayor feared serious violence if the parade reached Dock Street, where Catholics had erected a green arch of tree boughs. At this time, St. John lacked a professional police force. Now, unable or unwilling to separate the two sides, the civic authorities and a small garrison of British troops waited south of the Catholic line of battle. A serious riot developed in which the rocks, bricks, and firearms were used. Up to a dozen were killed and many more wounded, making the York Point riot the most serious outbreak of collective violence in New Brunswick history. Now, at the time, the economy, the political system, and the legal system were dominated by the Protestants, which also included immigrants from Britain. In contrast to previous incidents, the authorities issued warrants for Catholics and Protestants in nearly equal numbers. Yet all the Protestant suspects either had their charges dropped or were acquitted. 2 Roman Catholics who had been sent to trial were acquitted. The 1849 outbreak had 2 immediate impacts. St. John was given a more professional police force, and all sectarian parades were banned for a generation. Years later, Dock Street, which was site of the battle, was renamed St. Patrick's Street in honor of Irish immigrants. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's a little bit of the history of the interesting way that St. John was created and was a hotbed of sectarian and political violence. If you like what we're doing here with our historical podcast, let us know. Give us a like, comment, and subscribe. And as a person who was the sports editor of the Bugle Observer in Woodstock, I was made well aware of the Woodstock riots many years ago, and a lot of people believe the reason why the core party, English-speaking Canadians of New Brunswick, and other white power groups have thrived in Woodstock, including the KKK, because that was considered the more centralized white supremacy capital of New Brunswick. St. John, not as much, but you see, Woodstock had more rural commerce than St. John, and thus in the rural areas, especially Benton, Debec, Canterbury, all those areas, still to this day there's descendants of these white supremacists. Some know it, some don't know it, but if you can go on the internet too as well to see the parades in Debec and Benton with the KKK regalia, it's quite a photo. This was like mid-1920s in the Claverne era, which also actually included northern New Brunswick, like Dalhousie, Campbellton, Bathurst regions. Anyway, very interesting. So again, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening. Have a great evening and enjoy the weather. Bye.